doing the video today?
I am. Chris requested I do a video for the first lab, so I can
Okay.
send it to him. So.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Dan.
Dan.
Thanks.
Apparently Sam Walker is finishing up his Bachelor's of Architecture degree with 13-inch computer.
We'll wait one more minute and then get started, I think. So make sure you have your homework assignment loaded up as soon as you get logged in. And today we're going to go over essentially the rest of setting up the datums. So right now we've set up the column grids and you've imported an image. The reason we imported this image was so that we could at least scale it to something relatively close to our actual scale. So we had something that we could actually trace over. But you know, the image isn't going to be exactly scaled the way we want it, but we're just kind of using it as a background. One of the main reasons is so that we don't have to keep flipping back and forth between the architectural PDF and then also the Revit file. So this just kind of makes it a little more efficient. If you had a CAD file, most of the times when you're working with architects these days, they're going to have some kind of CAD file that you can get from the owner. You would import the CAD file and place it into your Revit workspace exactly the same way as we just did the image, but you would actually be using insert and either linking the CAD file or importing. And when you bring in a CAD file, you normally have this browse to window that will pop up. When you do that, you would actually just bring it in auto origin to origin and hit open essentially. That would bring in the CAD file, and then you'd still have to test out to make sure that it's scaled correctly. So just like we did with the image where you drew the line, you knew what one scale was versus the other, and then we scaled up the image. You'd do the same exact steps with a CAD file. So you can't always assume that a CAD file would be exactly drawn to scale as well. So you always want to, check that out as you can. So if you have your homework assignment open, you're going to need to click on the two images that you inserted. So you have level 1, and on level 2 you also inserted the other image. One of the things that we can do with images and any kind of background that we bring in is when you click on the image, you can toggle this little pin. So you see this kind of pin mark. You can either click it and make it, by default it's unpinned, but we can go ahead and click it so that we pin it, and that basically pins it to that location so we don't accidentally drag it around and move it around again. You can also get to that by, when you click on the image, there's also these icons up at the top here under modify. There's a pin and unpin. So that does the same thing. You can pin other model elements and objects, but it's really not recommended that you pin everything just to lock it in place. Usually it's best practice just to lock kind of background images and any kind of CAD files that you don't want to accidentally move around. Okay, does everyone have their projects open? I don't really see your projects open. I see one.
Did you realize that class is a little light today? I think it's because Chris's class is in New York.
Right.
Which has just occurred to me.
For grad students.
But I think that everybody's here.
Okay. I just want to make sure that you guys are going to have to really, in order to learn Revit, you can't just watch the screen. You're really going to have to be clicking around in your own files, and that's the reason for the homework assignments, is to finish up where we left off, and then also so that we can continue to move on and build your project. All right, so the next step is, what we've done is we've got our background image and now all of our column datums. So we've been working in our plan view, but what we want to do is also be able to set up our elevations. When you look in Revit and you click on elevation, let's just click on north for a second, you'll see all of your column grids also show up in the elevation, and again we can drag our start and end points of these column grids. If you go into the east, You should see your alphabetical, your A through J. In the north, you'll see your numbers 1 through whatever we went to, 16. But you'll also see these other elevation datums. By default, every project starts with a level 1 and a level 2, and the level 2 is set to 10 foot. What we really want to do is set these correctly to what our as-built drawings are telling us. So if I open up our PDF, we're also going to have your architectural PDF open. I'm going to scroll down to page 9 of this PDF. And so we're looking at these record drawings from the School of Architecture. I'm sorry, not page 9, we want page 11. Page 10 and 11 show some of the elevations and sections that were part of the record documents, as well as 11 shows like an enlarged section as well. But one of the key factors that we can see on that page when we zoom in, you should see these elevation markers, these elevation datums. These are telling you what the floor line elevations are from 0. Typically the ground floor or level 1 is set to 0, so you'll see right here it says, I guess I need to zoom in a little bit more here. Ground floor is 0. Right underneath here it says -8, but that's dealing with the mechanical building that's out back. That's the finished elevation for that, and we're not going to worry about that. So the ground floor is 0, second floor is 13 foot 4, and then we have these other two datums called top of parapet, low roof, and top of parapet, high roof. So what we want to do is level 1, we'll call that, we'll just keep it as level 1, and that is our first floor, so that's 0 foot. And one thing that we want to do is actually zoom out and click on this datum, and we want to drag that endpoint all the way through all of our column grids. This will make it so that no matter which way we cut through our model, we will always see these datums show up. We'll also want to go into the east elevation and do the same thing, but it looks like we kind of have to go backwards. We're going to have to drag where the target is and then drag all the way through on, from left to right. So let's go back into, actually really doesn't matter which elevation you're in, but I'm just going to be in the north. And our level 2, according to the record document, says that this should be at 13 foot 4 inches. So in order to move this datum to that level, all we have to do is click on this text and type in 13 foot 4 inches. That will automatically move this floor line up to the correct level from 0. You can also, if you were to select that datum, and I zoom out a little bit, you'll see a temporary dimension. You see this blue line that shows up, and it has a little dimension icon, and then there's also text. You can also move datums, so I could type in 20 feet in that temporary dimension, and it will move that datum up to 20 feet. And when I go back and look at my level 2, this is also documented and shown as 20 feet as well. So basically everything that you move with those dimensions is going to occur in all the different views. So even if I go into an east elevation, it's also at 13 foot 4 as well. Now that's associated, this line is associated with the level 2 in your project browser. So when you click on level 2, all of this information is actually at that datum. If we were to add another datum, so if we go to home and under your datum section of the tool palette, there's a level, we can go ahead and draw another one. So you can just left click and draw a line, and you'll see that up in the top left here on the options bar, there's this checkbox next to make plan view. If that's checked and we're making a new datum, and we move this across, and you'll notice as you try to align it with level 1 and 2 at the end, you get those dashed lines that are aligning this and locking it. As soon as we did that, I created level 3. You'll also notice in your project browser, another floor plan was created. So you have a level 3 floor plan And it also, populates down to the ceiling plans as well. So basically, if you have multiple floors in a project greater than 2, every time that you add one of these datums, you're essentially adding a new floor plan. I'm going to drag this other end all the way to align with the other side of my other datums. And now, to correspond with the top of parapet and the low roof and high roof, we're just going to add these datums so that we have something to eventually lock a top of wall or some other element to those particular datums. Now I don't necessarily need a floor plan for those, so I could, I'm going to actually delete this datum that I just created. And notice when I delete this level 3, I'm just going to click on it and hit delete on the keyboard. It's going to tell me that my view level 3 will be deleted. That's because that datum was tied to the project browser. So when I hit OK, you also notice on your project browser, the level 3 goes away. So again, just a word of caution, if you happen to set up all these datums and you really wanted level 3 on your project, if you happen to delete that datum that's shown on your elevations or sections, you're actually going to delete your drawing. So this time, since I really don't need a floor plan cut for these other 2 datums that are at 28 feet and 34 foot 8 on the record documents, this time when I draw a datum, I'll click on Home, Level, and I'm going to uncheck the Make Plan view. So now I can draw another line. And you'll notice that this time it did make a level 4. It just remembered that last time we made a level 3, and so it just wants to keep going up. But nothing happened in the project browser. So no plan view was actually added. And you'll also notice the difference of the 2 targets. One is blue and the other one is black. The one that's blue you can click on and it takes you directly into the level. So on level 2, if I double clicked on that target, I'm now in the level 2 floor plan. But the one that's black, I cannot click on it, it doesn't do anything. There is no link to that project browser. So again, anything that's blue that's in a symbol is a direct link to the project browser. So I know from my record documents that this is supposed to be at 28 feet. And I can also call this, instead of level 4, I can also call this, where's my caps lock? There it is. Top of parapet, low roof. That's what corresponds to exactly what was on this record document. So I was able to change that text, and I also want to drag my endpoint again so that all of my data markers are aligned together. Another thing I'm going to do is go back to where it says level 1 and level 2. And I'm going to change level 1 to actually say first floor. Notice what happens because this is a linked view to the project browser. When I hit the enter button, it's going to ask if I would like to rename all the corresponding views. I'm going to click yes, and in the project browser, you now see that level 1 turned to first floor, and of course, where it also occurred in ceiling plans did the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing for level 2 and call that second floor, and yes. And now I have a corresponding view and naming nomenclature that corresponds to my project browser and then also the datum. I'm going to do one more datum. I could just take this datum that I've already drawn and I could just copy it. So I could copy this up. And then I could also change this to be, what was it, 34 foot 8 inches. So, and this one is called, instead of level 5, will be top of parapet, high roof. I'm just dragging my column grids up a little bit more. You don't have to do that. Now remember ZF on your keyboard will zoom fit, so it'll zoom all the way out. And now what we've done is we've exactly set up a project where we can start drawing and start modeling, because we have column grid datums and we also have elevation datums, something to draw onto and draw to. I'm going to do a save as. I'm going to do save as project. And I called my first one a before class. I'll just call this lab 15, 315. One thing I didn't mention to you guys is that if you ever look at your file directory, where you're actually saving all of your files, when you look at, right now I saved a lab 315, but before I had these other lab classes, you'll start to see that you'll get a your initial file name, and then occasionally you'll get these other files that say .0002, 0003, 004, or they might have different suffixes. Essentially what Revit is doing is every time you hit save, it's creating 3 backups of your file at different intervals and different times. So you'll see that this one was done at 7:45 p.m., this 004 was at 7:23, and then these other ones were at 7 o'clock. So basically, just in case you happen to lose, or your file becomes corrupt and you lose a file, you can always go back and open these up as a backup. But when you're submitting files to for the homework assignments, you want to make sure you're submitting the one that doesn't have the .000s after it, because this is the one that is the latest save. Because if you happen to send one of these, that might be something, you might have done a lot of work between 7 o'clock and 7:45, and that work's not going to show up. So just remember that as you kind of maneuver around. Also, one last thing, just with the windows, I'm turning on where I can see, it says hide extensions for known file types. I'm just turning that off for right now. Everything that you do in Revit that's in the project environment, so when you start a new project, the file extension for Revit files is .rvt. Whenever we're in, I'm just going to go to these to the project browser. Whenever you're in the family environment and you're saving a file, those are going to be .rfa files. So when you start to look at Revit extensions and you're looking at different file types, you can only open RVT files in the project environment and RFA files in the family environment. That'll come more clear as we start to explore those a little bit more. Okay, so let's get into drawing some walls and knowing what we're supposed to be drawing. So I'm going to click in the first floor, and if I zoom in kind of on this top left quadrant of the image, I'm kind of over where we've got offices 123 to office 129 shown. There's also some dimensions shown on this drawing, so when we zoom in, we can see we've got 10 foot, 8 foot, so on. But also, you'll notice on the drawings, they don't really dimension what the thickness of the wall is. You don't see a dimension that says this is 8 inches, although you do kind of see it at this location. But we all know that walls that are 8 inches, truly when they're built, aren't really 8 inches. They're probably some other fractional number. So how do we know what type of wall we're supposed to be drawing? When you look at a set of construction documents, you'll see these tags with the little diamonds. And they might vary depending on who the architect is, but usually by default, and even Revit's default, is that you have these diamond tags and a little line that goes through the wall. That's indicating a wall type tag. The wall type tag is saying, so this wall up towards the top here is a wall type 2. The one that is here in the middle is an 11A. And you'll kind of, if you zoom out, you'll see that there might be other walls around here. So you see another one, a 5A. and so on. Well, when you have a set of record documents, how do you know exactly where to find that information? So I'm going to go into our PDF, and unfortunately, again, these will have to get scanned eventually. I kind of know what these are supposed to be saying, but if we go back to page 9, you'll see on the right side of this page, you'll see these this column here called wall types. You also see the diamond symbol. If I zoom in, you can see that this diamond has a 13, a 13A, a 14. So I need to go back over here where I see 1, a 2, and a 2A. And normally a wall type drawing, when it's scheduled, shows a section cut through a wall, and it shows all the different layers of the wall, and usually some sort of overall dimension, and then it also calls out what each of the different layers are. So one of the wall types that we were looking at was a wall type 2, and if we look here, it says 8-inch CMU, so it's an 8-inch nominal CMU. Normally when you call out different walls, either the thickness or something that's in regards to CMU or whatever, you call out a nominal dimension, so that you're usually just saying that this is an 8-inch wall, and you're not really saying that it's the true dimension is 7 5/8 for that thickness of CMU. So again, when we scroll down, there was an 11A. The 11A, you can look here, it shows that that wall type is actually a 6-inch metal stud with a layer of gypboard on either side. So it's saying 6-inch metal studs, and you can't really read this text right here, but I know when you kind of zoom to other locations, you see 5-inch gypboard being used. And that's kind of a standard. And I also know that this overall dimension here says that this wall type is 7 1/4. Well, if you add the 6-inch metal stud, which is truly 6 inches, and the 2 layers, the 5/8 inch on each side, you'll end up with 7 1/4 inches. So, to start drawing in Revit, when we click on Home and we click on Wall, you'll notice that off in the Project Properties section on the left side, you have a pull-down menu. You can click on this button, and you have a series of basic walls that are already part of Revit. You'll see typically they have some walls that are just called generic walls, and there's a generic 8-inch wall. Let's just go ahead and pick that and analyze how that wall is made up. Now in Revit, you don't necessarily need to know all of the wall layers in order to draw a wall. You just sometimes need to know what a general thickness is supposed to be. So I'm just going to say generic 8 inches for now, and we're just going to draw a wall. So what we're going to do is we've got the wall type, we've chosen basic wall, and we can zoom in, and we can just left click and then draw, and you can, when you're done drawing, you can hit escape. And you'll see I have this dark line, and then I just have a white wall layer that's over on top of your drawing. Now remember, we already know what this wall is supposed to be, so we know that this wall is actually supposed to be, since it's a wall type 2, it's an 8-inch CMU, we basically need to know that it's 7 5/8 inches. If we click on the wall and then click on Edit Type under the Properties, you'll see that it says that the width of this wall is 8 inches. Well, that's probably pretty obvious because the name of the wall is called generic 8 inches. The way that Revit works is that you normally select a wall, or you start with some object, and then when you want to make something new, we always duplicate it. Revit always needs something to start with, and then you can duplicate it and then modify it. So I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to call this a new wall. We'll call this, I'm going to call this 0, 0, 0. Let's do 3 zeros, underscore, and we'll call this, since we already know that this is supposed to be wall type 2, let's just call it wall type 2. And then I might give some description after it. So I've got wall type 2, and I might put a hyphen, And then I might just call this 8-inch CMU, just so that I know exactly what this wall is supposed to be. In a project, you could end up with 10 plus wall types, and after a while you might get confused about, well, is this supposed to be wall type 1 or wall type 2 when I'm drawing? So I'm going to hit OK, and all that did was give me a new name. But in order to edit what that wall is made out of, all walls have this button here called Structure, and we can hit the Edit button. When we look here, it says Structure, and there's two boundaries. There's like this gray bar at the top. There's a core boundary. I'll get into that in a little bit, but for right now, since this is kind of just going to be a generic wall, let's just change the thickness from 8 inches to 7 5/8 inches, because that's what the actual thickness of the wall was supposed to be. I can hit OK, and then OK again, and you should notice the thickness of your wall changed as soon as you did that. And also, when I select this, you also notice on the top left under Properties that your wall type is now called 00 Wall Type 2 8-inch CMU. The reason I put that 00 in the front is when you click on the basically the button, the pull-down menu, Revit will always list everything in alphabetical and numeric order. So by default, Revit comes with all of these other different wall types. If I were to just call this 8-inch CMU or just a CMU or even wall type 2, I'd have to hunt in alphabetical order down this scroll bar in order to find that wall again. So since I'm making new things, I tend to like to, reorganize Revit a little bit and put all of my stuff towards the top. And so that was the reason for putting 000 there. Okay, so what we can do now is we can start drawing. We've got this wall. I can actually just kind of move this around, move the end point until I get to 10 feet. You can see there's always a temporary dimension when you start to maneuver things around in Revit. I could also just click on the temporary dimension and type in 10 feet. I can click on that wall and use my arrow keys to reposition it. So I can move it up and down. And for right now, I'm just kind of getting it close to what it looks like on the underlay of that image. Eventually, we might find that we're kind of fractional dimensions off, and we'll have to adjust it and actually make it actual and kind of start to disregard what's happening with the actual dimensions of Revit. So I'm going to go ahead and draw another wall. And again, I'm just going to keep it this basic wall type 8 inches. And now I actually need to deselect. Sorry, you might want to escape if you had your wall selected. I'm going to select wall again and go back and select my wall type 00. And when you start to draw walls, you'll notice in this option bar, there was a set of information here that says height, and it says unconnected, and it said 20 feet. And then my location line is wall center line, but if I hit the down arrow here next to wall center line, I could also place walls by finished exterior, finished interior, core exterior, core interior, and core center line. I'll go into all those as we proceed here. But by default, it's wall center line, which means when you draw a wall, you can see that you're drawing at the center line. If I were to change this to something like finished face exterior, and I draw, you now see that my blue dashed line is on one side of the wall. If I hit the space bar, my wall will flip. So it flips across, just in case you were drawing on one side and it wasn't on the right exterior that you were expecting to draw on, you can flip it. So let's go ahead, and what I wanted to do was draw with the finished face exterior, and I'm going to snap to this point of this wall, and I'll go down to this location. And notice when I just drew that wall, Revit automatically trims those lines out of there and makes that a continuous wall. I can keep selecting home, wall, and after a while it starts to remember that, oh, I guess you want to keep drawing with this particular wall type. And so it'll keep popping up and we can continue to draw. And it remembered your last settings of finished space exterior. And you notice now when I'm drawing, I'm not quite drawing where I need that wall to be. So I might just flip it around and then continue. Now I'm going to click in my 3D view. If you guys don't have a 3D view set up, click on View and then Default 3D View. That will create a 3D view, and then in brackets, you're basically now starting to look at your walls that are being generated. Now if I click on that wall and look in my properties, you notice it says that my unconnected height, I'll expand my properties bar here a little bit. It says unconnected height is 20 feet. Well, we know that this is supposed to be going from first floor to second floor, and we just know that we drew our datum lines to say that the second floor was at 13 foot 4 inches. So what we really want to do is make sure that these walls go up to the second floor. You could come in here and type in that this should be at 13 foot 4 inches. And when I do that, my height of my wall changes. But if I click in a elevation view, let's go to east elevation. There they are. Okay. You'll see that I took this wall and I brought it up to, by typing in 13 foot 4, but it says the top constraint is unconnected. So if I were to take this floor that's at 13 foot 4, and in the design process, we're kind of building an as-built condition, so we probably won't move the floors around. But if you're actually building a design project, you might decide later on that this floor should have been something like 14 foot 8 inches. So if I do that and type in that move, this wall did not move with that datum line. So what we really want to start doing is start learning how to set up constraints. Constraints are parameters in Revit that say where this wall should be connected. So this top constraint, we could actually, once we select the wall, we can select the wall and say top constraint instead of unconnected. If you click in that space, you get a down arrow. We could say that this should go up to the second floor. I'm going to select all of the rest of my walls, and what I did there is just like in AutoCAD and other programs, if you window from left to right, you only select what's in that window. If you window from right to left, you get the dashed lines, and anywhere that line or that window crosses, we'll select those items. So I selected those other two walls, and I'm going to come in here and say that those should also go up to the second floor. Now, I was just recently changed my second floor to be 14 foot 8. I went back into the south elevation, and we need to put that back into the correct 13 foot 4 section. And you'll also notice as soon as I did that, now that we set that top constraint, all of those walls also moved down with that datum. Okay, let's continue drawing. We could also right click on an existing wall, and you can say create similar as an option with the pop-up window. And we could continue, and what that would do is take all of the properties that we've already set with this last wall, and you'll see here now it says height is going up to second floor as a top constraint. Location line is the finished face exterior, because it's taking those elements or those parameters for that wall and applying it here. So I'm going to continue drawing and tracing over all of these the best that I can. And I'm not going to worry too much about where these walls all end up. We know that they all should probably be aligned together, but we can come back and make that happen. So I'm just going to end at that location. So since I started with, and actually I need, let's create a couple more on this top, the left side. You'll kind of see that as you draw, Revit automatically tries to align with something off to the right side or left side of your screen. You might have seen some dashed lines kind of lock into another wall position. The other method of aligning things, I probably didn't exactly align all of these other walls correctly as I was drawing because I wasn't really paying attention. I'm going to go to Modify and use my Align tool. So you see Align right up here at the top. I'm also going to, in the Quick Access toolbar, this toolbar at the very top, I'm going to click on this, what's called Thin Lines. This basically is a default in Revit that turns off all the line weights in your view, because Revit wants to show you all of the thicknesses of the different line weights as you draw. But sometimes that can get distracting, especially when we start to get a lot of different layers. You'll start to get a really black blob of line, and I just want to see the exact position of all these different lines. So I'm going to click on the line, and I'm going to use the first set of walls that I drew as my base point. Down at the bottom here it says, please select a line or point to reference for alignment. When you use the line tool, you always pick the item that you want to, the element that you want to stay, and the second element that you pick is the element that's going to move to that to the location to align to the actual wall that is staying in position. So I'm going to click on the outside face, and then I'm going to click on the outside face of the wall that's to the right. As soon as I do that, you get this padlock that shows up. If you can't see it, you might have to zoom around. But because we did the align command, before we exit out of it, Revit assumes that you probably wanted to align this information or align this wall and lock it. So I'm going to lock it together. And what that does is now when I take this wall that I just drew at the very beginning, and if I were to move this, let's say I move this up, that wall that we just aligned to also moves with it. I'm going to Control Z so that it goes back into position, and I'm going to do that with all of these bump outs. Alright, and we'll do the same thing with the lower level. So I'll use, looks like this one wall that I drew here first, looks like it's in the right location. So I'll use that as my base point. I'm going to hit save. It's good to, when you start getting things built in Revit, that you always hit save. Now one thing that we have to do is verify that we've built this correctly, because we've just kind of traced this at the moment, right? We've just traced it over the image, but we've scaled our image and we believe our image is scaled correctly, but we're never going to truly have an image exactly scaled correctly because just of the line weights of the original image and so on. So I'm going to now start using the dimensions. So I can click on Annotate and Aligned Dimension. In Revit, a lot of times, even though you imagine dimensions going on last, going on later on after you've documented, you want to document your project and put it on a drawing sheet, in Revit, we actually use dimension strings to draw and to reposition things quite a bit. So when I align a dimension or use the align dimensions, you'll see that when I hover over, it wants me to dimension to the center line. You see how I'm hovering over and the center line is highlighting. But if I look at the dimensions that are on the drawing, it wants me to dimension to the outside face of this wall. Well, when we're using align dimension, just like when we're doing the walls, drawing the walls, you have modify place dimensions up at the top, and you have where you can place the dimension string. So should it be wall faces or wall center lines, we'll pick wall faces. And now when we do that, it defaults and wants to pick your outside face of the wall. even if we had wall center lines picked, you could tab over. So if you hover your cursor over an outside face, if you tab over, you'll see that it highlights blue. And it's hard to see on the screen, the blue and black don't always come up, but you should see it on your screen. The tab key is used quite a bit to select something that you can't always automatically select to. So I'm going to draw a dimension. I'm using wall faces as my dimension point. And I'm going to dimension from this lower wall over to this other side. I'm going to keep doing this all the way down. And you can see that even though I thought I was right on the mark when I was drawing, my dimensions, and you just kind of, when you're done, you drag your dimension up or down and then left click, and that will position where the dimensions are shown. You'll notice that we didn't quite get the exact dimensions that we needed. So I can do, I know this one, that one worked out well, it's at 10 foot. But if I want to make sure that I'm now working correctly, I can now select a wall. So the wall that I want to move is, I have this wall over to the left, this one's correct, it's at 10 feet. That means this wall is correct. It's this wall right here that is not correct, at least in my drawing. Maybe yours, you might have slightly different numbers. But basically, the wall that I want to move is the one that I want to select. And you'll see that as I did that, you get these blue dimensions that show up that were part of your dimension string. I can now click in there and type, wait a second. It's showing two sets of dimensions. It's showing the temporary dimensions and then also my dimension string. I'm going to drag this off down to the bottom here real quick. There you go. So even if I didn't draw a dimension, right now I drew a dimension line, and when I click on it, I can actually edit this dimension line now. But you also see you get these other dimension strings up at the top or somewhere else on your screen. It's still showing you the temporary dimensions. Every time you click on an object, there's always a temporary dimension. What we want to do is click on the one that has to do with our dimensions we actually drew, and I'm going to type in 8 feet. And that now moved that wall to be the correct dimension. This one is at 10 foot, so that's good. I'll keep going here. So it's 10 foot, we got another 8 foot. $10 foot, and this one should be 8 foot. So now that I've done that, I now know that my drawing, my model that I'm actually doing is correct to the actual background. Now you'll see that when I zoom in, I didn't really scale my background exactly correctly, so I've got a little bit of overlap here, but we want to actually deal with the actual dimensions that we're working with here. You need to go to the class website real quick. So jrodesign.com, Revit. Your login was guest, and the password is on the board. Under resources and family downloads, I've posted some families that we're going to start to bring into our project. These are approved, my approved family types that I want us to use. You can find a lot of families out there online. You can also find families that are default as part of Revit. So when I click on home and door, there's already a family type that's drawn in here for doors. But I have additional settings and everything that are associated with my family, so I want us to start using those instead of the Revit default. Go ahead and download the one that's called Door Single Plain Panel Hollow Metal Frame. So I can click on that and we'll save it as, and I'm going to save it into my location where I've been saving my project. Notice it's a .rfa file and not an RVT. So I'm going to click Save. Everyone download that file? Yes, no? If not, raise your hand and Brian or Carson can come by and help you.
I want to know that align dimension thing, that when I'm taking the dimension, it's kind of taking the center line and not the edges.
Oh, so you need to draw a real dimension line. Remember I drew the under annotate and used align dimensions and make an actual dimension string. The one that you saw to your center lines, that is a temporary dimension. So when I click on it, you see I get another
Right.
set that's going to the center line. Those are called temporary dimensions. And you can actually toggle. So if you see this little circle that's on the temporary dimension, you can click through that and that'll cycle through where that's dimensioning to,
I see.
and it'll go to the outside face. You can also, one thing is go under manage, additional settings. And if you click on temporary dimensions down at the bottom, by default, all temporary dimensions are going to wall center lines, and door and windows are going to center lines. Typically, in architecture, we're always interested in the outside face of everything, so the default should really be wall faces, and then for our openings, we probably want to go to the openings. And if we set that there, from now on, whenever we click our temporary dimensions, it should go to the outside face of everything. Mm-hmm. When does this lab end?
Technically, right
Right now.
Okay, well, we're gonna go about 5 minutes here, 5 to 10
now. We
minutes.
usually go.
Yeah, so we can finish this this last part, which is bringing in, basically adding in some detail to the wall, and then also basically adding in the door that we just downloaded. Let's, in order to load that door that we just downloaded, okay, we found this from an outside source, and we're clicking on door, under home door, and we don't see the door that we want. You know, Revit only has this one door type, and I don't really like how it shows up because they don't show the door frame and they don't show all these other conditions that we typically like to see. You'll also notice that off to the top right, you get this button called Load Family. So anytime you don't have an item, you have this opportunity to load a family. We can click on this and you get the browser that pops up. By default, it always goes to the project library that's available in Revit. We'll get into this later on, but there's all these different families that you can load in. So you have doors and lights and curtain wall panels. But this is just the kind of the default package that comes with Revit. What I want to do is scroll to where I just saved my family called Door Single Plane Panel Hollow Metal Frame. I'm going to click on that and hit Open. When I do that, that actually loads the family. You can now see I have the family loaded. And there's one door type or two door types in there called, one's called 3 foot by 7 foot, another one's 3'6" by 7 foot. Pick the one that's 3 foot by 7. And now when we hover over the wall, you'll see that when you're not hovering over a wall, you get this Ghostbuster sign that says no. But when you hover over a wall, you start to see the door being placed. I can hover over, and if I kind of move towards the top of the wall, it wants to have the door swing out. If I hover towards the bottom, it wants the door to swing in. I can also hit the space bar, and that will toggle left, right. So I can go ahead and just left click, and that automatically cut a door into my wall and also placed this image, which right now I'm going to hide because it's kind of getting in the way of what you're seeing. I'm selecting my image, and down at the very bottom there's this temporary hide isolate. It's a pair of sunglasses. I'm going to hit hide element just so I can kind of see the screen a little bit better. By default, Revit wants to place a door tag associated with this door, so that's what this little pill is that shows up with a number 1. There's also these, when you click on the door, these flip arrows, so I can actually click on these arrows and it flips the door, just in case I didn't position it correctly. But right now I'm going to select that door tag and hit delete. And you'll see that when I look at my door, I'm not seeing all the parts of my door that I would like to. Down at the very bottom, there's this detail level next to where it says 1/8 inch equals a foot. If I click on that and click on Find View, I now see the door frame. I actually see the hollow metal door jamb of the door. There's a lot of things in Revit that you can see when you're in a coarse view versus a medium view versus a fine view. It's basically a level of detail looking at your project. There's sometimes when you don't really want to see a bunch of detail and you just want that coarse view, and that's kind of, you know, the way to toggle through the visibility of your model. So I can just click on this and actually right click and say create similar. And I can come over to the other side here and draw a wall. And it keeps wanting to place a tag. Next time when I place a door, if I just go to where it says tag on placement and uncheck that or unclick on it, the next time I place a door, so if I come over to this other side, I'll click on door, my tag on placement is not highlighted. And this time when I place the door, you can actually see that there is no door tag that's being placed. If we look on this at 3D, spin around a little bit, you can see your doors are now being placed in the model as well. One last thing we're going to do, one thing I just want to mention is you can click on this door and there's additional settings. So I have the graphics here where it says what is the swing in the 2D plan line work is at 90 degrees. I could change that to 45 degrees for that door. And it would change my door swing. And go back to 90. And then there's also a 3D panel. So I could make this 45. And then when I look at it in 3D, this door opens. That's why we're using this door and not the default door that you find in Revit, because there's some additional parameters that are added into this door. Last item, we're going to draw another wall. So since we just hid that image, click on your temporary hide isolate and click on reset temporary hide isolate. That'll bring back that information. We can go back later and actually, dimension to and position these doors correctly. But the last item I want us to do is click on wall, edit type, and we're going to duplicate this and call this wall type 11A. And if you remember in that wall type when we looked at the PDF, that was actually a 6-inch metal stud wall with gypboard. So I might just put a information after this and call this 6-inch metal stud with GWB each side, something like that. Just give yourself a little bit of description of what this wall is supposed to be. Under the structure of this wall, this time we're going to actually set a material. So again, you duplicated that wall, you called it this name, structure, edit. Under structure, let's go ahead and click on by category. You get this little button that pops up. We can go ahead and click on that, and now this gives you a list of possible materials that are loaded into Revit. Let's go ahead and find metal stud layer, click OK, and then we're going to give this a thickness of 6 inches. Now we also want our layers of gypboard, so we want a layer of 5/8 gypboard on either side. We can insert, down here at the bottom, click on insert, another layer, and then when we click on this number 2, we want to move it up. We're moving it out of the core boundary towards the exterior side. What we're doing is saying that the core is the structure, and then eventually we want other layers of wall finishes either on the exterior side or interior side. I'm going to click under function. Instead of structure, I'm going to make this finish. You can pick either one of these, finish 1 or finish 2. I'll just say finish 2. And then click on material by category. This time we're going to find gypsum wallboard. Click OK, and we give this a thickness of 5/8 inch. So 5/8. We'll insert another one and this time move this down all the way below to the interior side. Repeat the same steps, finish 2. And then we want the layers to be, or the material, gypsum wallboard, hit OK, and give that a 5/8 inch dimension. You'll notice at the top here it's giving you some information that says total thickness is 7 1/4 inches. It's adding up all that information that you've entered in. Remember on the PDF document, this wall also said it was supposed to be 7 1/4. So I think we know we've built this correctly. We can go ahead and hit OK, OK again, and now we can draw this wall that's right here at 11A. Just kind of drag it into the other wall. Now when we zoom in on this wall, because we're in a fine view, you can actually see, and again I'm just going to hide this image that's in the background. You can actually see the different layers of the chipboard. Versus on this other side, we just saw like a 7 5/8 inch thick line. If we were to just go back to a coarse view, you'd only see the outside layers of your wall. So in a fine view, you actually see that level of detail. That's all we have time for today. The assignment is going to be a little bit larger from Thursdays to Tuesdays. Usually from Tuesdays to Thursdays, we don't have a whole lot of time, so we can probably do a quick little assignment. But basically what I want you guys to do, now maybe I need to draw a line. Let's see, annotate, detail line. Have it on lines. I'm going to draw a rectangle. Might be hard to see. Essentially, I want you guys on the first floor and on the second floor to model all of the walls that are associated with the offices, all the way around the salon, and then also the walls around the crit rooms. So again, you should be looking at what your wall types are, and you're going to insert the doors as well. For right now, just insert the door that we've talked about, the 3 foot by 7 foot door, and just go around and don't worry about the windows. There's some windows that you see, all these different openings. Wherever the windows are located, if this is a wall type 2, just draw a wall type 2 all the way through, and don't worry about the windows. We'll cut windows later. And do that for both floors, your first floor and second floor. Okay? And we'll need that for the start of next lab. Save that. You guys are going to need my start file. Probably. Where do you want me to dump it? You guys want to log in or?
Yeah, I'll log in.
Okay. Let me.
And the bracket.
You need to stop the video there.
I'm not really sure how to do that.
Usually like a button. You know where Dan is. Get all that?
I think so.
The key is just getting that far. It doesn't matter if it's all the way across how I went.
Okay.
And just so that they know the process so that they can complete the rest of the assignment. Just a little touch screen, usually.
Right here.
See, my camera has a little piece right there.
Is it on the back?
Yeah, it might be on the back.